A blanket of snow covered the streets of Chicago, quieting the chaos of the city. In that silence, a little girl clutched her worn teddy bear and whispered 6 words that could break the coldest heart. Everyone has a home. Except me. Imagine sitting in your warm car, watching her lips tremble in the freezing air. What would you do? Most people keep walking. But one man stopped, and that decision changed 3 lives. Forever. This is not just a story about wealth or power. It is about what it truly means to stay, to belong, and to build a family where none existed before. If you believe that love can appear in the most unexpected places, then stay with us. Subscribe to the Retold Stories so you never miss a tale that might just change the way you see the world. The city of Chicago was blanketed by snow that evening, a storm that seemed to hush even the loudest corners of the bustling streets. Streetlights glowed amber through the swirling flurries, headlights blurred, and the sidewalks became silver sheets of slush. To anyone watching from the outside, it was simply another winter night. But for Henry Whitmore, seated behind the wheel of a black SUV, it was the night his life began to shift. Henry was a man everyone in the business world knew by name. He was only 40, but already the head of one of the city's largest real estate companies. He owned condos in multiple cities, had his name engraved on hospital wings, and wore tailored suits that never wrinkled. Yet, inside that sleek car, he sat still, staring out through a fogged windshield without really seeing anything. His phone buzzed with reminders of obligations, an investor gala, a board meeting, a deal to finalize. He switched it off. The silence inside the vehicle was heavy, almost oppressive. He was not tired, not exactly. He was simply empty. It was then that his gaze shifted toward the bakery across the street. A soft golden light spilled from the doorway, catching the flakes as they fell, and beneath the lamppost, at the edge of the sidewalk, he noticed her. Small, fragile, no older than 6, with knees tucked to her chest and a teddy bear pressed so tightly to her that it looked like her lifeline. Her coat was thin, worn at the seams, and her boots were untied. She whispered something into the cold, words carried off by the snow. Curious, Henry lowered his window, and the night air slapped his face. That is when he heard her clearly. Everyone has a home, except me. The words pierced him in a way no corporate betrayal, no financial loss, no headline could. They struck at the hollow part of him that he had ignored for years. He had everything, wealth, recognition, endless comforts, yet nothing that could make him feel whole. And this little girl, with cheeks reddened from the cold, spoke a truth that shook him. For a moment he wanted to turn away, to tell himself it wasn't his concern. He was a man of contracts, not stray children. But his hand betrayed him, already reaching for the door handle. The wind rushed in as he stepped outside, chilling him through his expensive coat. His polished shoes sank into icy water, but he walked toward her. "Hey," he said softly. "Are you all right?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were dark, unblinking, older than her years. She didn't flinch. She simply answered with that devastating whisper. "Everyone has a home, except me." Henry froze. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. He could buy buildings, influence votes, command entire markets, but here he was staring at a child who had nothing and realizing he had no answer. She stood up then, brushing snow from her teddy bear, and began walking away toward the shadows of an alley. She didn't run, didn't hide, just walked with the certainty of someone who knew where she belonged, even if that place was far from safe. Henry hesitated only a second before following. Her footsteps were light, almost soundless in the snow. He matched her pace, trying not to frighten her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nora," she replied without slowing. She pointed to a dimly lit stairwell leading to a metal door. "That's where my aunt lives, kinda where I live too." She pulled a key from a string around her neck, unlocked the dented door, and disappeared inside. Henry, against every instinct of caution, stepped in after her. The hallway smelled of damp carpet and frying oil. His shoes stuck slightly to the linoleum as he followed Nora down the corridor. She knocked on a door, and a young woman answered, her hair tied in a messy bun, paint on her wrists. Her eyes sharpened as she saw Henry, protective and weary. This was Claire, Nora's aunt. She worked long shifts, piecing together rent in this crumbling building while raising her niece since the girl's mother had died during childbirth. The father, Claire explained bitterly, had left before Nora was even born. Henry listened in silence. Every detail made the child's whispered words heavier. No real home. Just borrowed spaces, late rent, and the fragile courage of a girl too young to carry such burdens. When Nora offered him a cookie from a tin, he accepted with both hands, humbled. And when Claire, defensive yet honest, asked why he was there, Henry could only admit, "I saw her outside. I couldn't just keep driving." Later, as he returned to his car, he sat behind the wheel and thought about what she had asked him. "Are you someone who keeps walking, or someone who helps?" The question lingered like a challenge. In his world, people walked past problems every day. But what if she was right? What if that was the problem? That night, sleep did not come easily. Every time Henry closed his eyes, he saw her thin coat, her untied boots, her whisper carried on the snow. He saw her teddy bear, worn but loved, and her small hand holding onto a reality no child should know. He turned in bed, restless, until the morning light finally broke through the skyline of glass towers he had once believed to find him. He made a choice. He returned the next day, carrying groceries in one hand and a portable heater in the other. Claire eyed him with suspicion, but Nora's face lit up when she saw him again. He plugged in the heater, watched the warmth spread through the small apartment, and handed the girl a muffin. She devoured it with delight. In that moment, Henry realized this wasn't charity. This was humanity. For the first time in years, he felt alive. Henry had never been a man who repeated visits. His life was built on schedules, meetings, and transactions that moved forward without looking back. Yet the morning after meeting Nora, he found himself returning to the same run-down apartment building, his arms full with groceries and a space heater tucked under one elbow. His driver had offered to accompany him, but Henry refused. He wanted to do this himself. Claire opened the door in a faded sweater, her expression guarded. For a brief moment, she looked like she might shut the door again. But when Nora came rushing forward barefoot, her smile wide and eager, Claire sighed and stepped aside. Henry entered, feeling the chill clinging to the air, even with the small heater humming weakly in the corner. He set down the new one, plugged it in, and watched as warmth began to fill the room with a low hum. "You didn't have to do that," Claire muttered. "I know," Henry replied simply, "but I wanted to." They sat around a tiny kitchen table while Nora devoured a muffin from the grocery bag. Crumbs clung to her lips, and she sipped orange juice like it was the finest drink she'd ever had. Claire stirred instant coffee into mismatched mugs, her hands rough from long hours of work. For Henry, who was accustomed to crystal glasses and catered luncheons, this moment was strangely grounding. It was not polished, not perfect, but it was real. When Nora darted off to the living room, Henry's gaze landed on the refrigerator. A drawing was pinned with a flower-shaped magnet. 3 figures beneath a night sky. One was small, arms stretched wide. One wore a dress. And the third, a tall man in a boxy suit with the letter H scribbled on the chest. Claire noticed his expression. "She drew that after you left yesterday," she explained softly. "She tends to feel things quickly." Henry did not speak right away. He was undone by the idea that this little girl, who had known him for less than a day, already imagined him as part of her world. It was not pity he felt, but something deeper, an ache for belonging. He asked if he could borrow the drawing for a while. Claire blinked in surprise, but agreed. "If you really want to understand her," she said, "you'll need to see what home means in her eyes." From that day, Henry kept returning. He brought small comforts, warm blankets, better food, even art supplies, so Nora could keep filling her sketchbook. Claire remained cautious, studying him as though waiting for the moment he would disappear. But Henry stayed. He rearranged meetings, postponed calls, and found excuses to be there. At first, he convinced himself it was temporary, a distraction, a way to silence the gnawing emptiness inside. But the more time he spent with Nora and Claire, the less he wanted to leave. One evening, Henry carried a long cardboard box up the stairs. Nora's eyes widened when she saw it. "What's in there?" she asked, hopping on her toes with excitement. He only smiled. "Close your eyes." She did, squeezing them shut as tightly as she held her teddy bear. Henry climbed onto a chair and began sticking glow-in-the-dark stars across the ceiling. When he finally told her to look, she gasped. "It's my sky!" she cried. He nodded. "Now you'll always have stars, even on cloudy nights." She threw her arms around him, small and fierce, and in that hug Henry felt a piece of himself click into place. Claire stood in the doorway, her hand pressed to her chest. She said nothing, but her eyes shimmered with unspoken gratitude. For years she had carried the weight of 2 lives, never expecting help from anyone. And now here was a man who could have ignored them, but instead chose to show up, again and again. As the days turned into weeks, Henry became part of their rhythm. He walked Nora home from school on days when Claire worked late. He listened as Nora talked about spelling words and her dream of becoming a scientist, or maybe an astronaut, or maybe both. He watched Claire rediscover pieces of herself, smiling more easily, laughing with genuine joy. She even took a part-time job at a nonprofit art studio, teaching children to paint murals. Henry once stopped by unannounced and stood in the doorway watching her laugh with the kids. For the first time, he saw not just a tired waitress struggling to survive, but a woman with talent, patience, and resilience. They began to share small rituals, coffee after her shifts, simple dinners at the small kitchen table, evenings where Nora showed him her newest drawings. Henry found himself ignoring phone calls, letting investor crises wait, because sitting on the floor cutting stars from yellow paper with a little girl mattered more than closing a multi-million-dollar deal. One night, Nora handed him a new drawing. It was a picture of 3 people holding hands outside a modest apartment. Underneath his figure, written in uneven red crayon, was one word: Dad. Henry's throat tightened. He folded the paper carefully and whispered, "I'll earn it." But not all changes go unchallenged. One evening, a knock at the door shattered their fragile peace. Claire opened it to find a man standing there in a cheap suit, his hair slicked back, a manila folder under his arm. Jason, Nora's biological father. His smug smile faltered only when he saw Henry standing in the room. He announced his intention to reclaim custody, brandishing his so-called stability and legal rights. Nora clutched Henry's shirt, her small body trembling. Claire's voice turned icy. "You left before she was born." "I've changed," Jason insisted, eyes narrowing at Henry. "Who's this? Daddy Warbucks?" Henry stood tall, his voice calm but firm. "You need to leave," Jason smirked. "Don't worry, I'll be back with a court order." His footsteps echoed down the hallway like a storm approaching. That night, Nora couldn't sleep. She curled against Henry, whispering, "Do I have to go with him?" Henry brushed her hair back gently. "No one is taking you away," he promised. Being a father isn't about who shows up last, it's about who never leaves. In the days that followed, Henry hired a private investigator. The reports were damning. Jason's ties to criminal networks, his history of parole violations, his shady job at a loan business doubling as a drug front. Claire's hands shook as she read the file. "He's dangerous," Henry nodded. "But he won't win, not this time." Still, fear left its mark. Nora's drawings grew darker, jagged lines, broken windows, small figures hiding under trees. She chewed her nails, flinched at sudden noises, wet the bed. Henry doubled security at their building and personally walked her to and from school. Yet even with all his power and resources, he knew the battle ahead would not be won in boardrooms or contracts. It would be fought in a courtroom, where love and presence would have to prove stronger than blood. And when the day came, Henry was ready. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and old paper, its marble floors echoing with every nervous step. Henry had been inside rooms far more intimidating: federal hearings, high-stakes negotiations worth billions. But as he sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 3C, his stomach churned in a way he could not control. Beside him, Claire clutched a folder of documents: school records, doctor's notes, photographs. On his other side, Nora leaned against him, her tiny hand gripping his, her teddy bear squeezed tight against her chest. She wore a blue dress dotted with white stars, her favorite, but she did not smile. She sat still, waiting for a storm she did not understand, but could feel in her bones. The doors opened, and Jason entered with his lawyer, a wiry man in a cheap suit. Jason's hair was slicked back, and his cologne hung in the air like arrogance. He smirked when he saw them, as though the outcome was already written in his favor. Claire stiffened, and Henry placed a steady hand on her arm. "He's not getting her," Henry murmured. She gave a tight nod. Inside, the courtroom was simple wood paneling, an American flag, and a judge seated high above. Yet to Nora, it was a battlefield. She sat between Claire and Henry, clutching her bear so hard that its seams strained. Jason's lawyer began with practiced charm, spinning a narrative of reform. He painted Jason as a man who had stumbled but changed, a man ready to reconnect with the daughter he had been absent from. He waved a lease for a one-bedroom apartment as proof of stability. "Mr. Moore has the legal right to pursue a relationship with his biological daughter," the lawyer declared. Claire's attorney countered with years of absence, criminal records, and a photograph of Nora taken without consent, evidence of stalking. She spoke of a child raised with love and sacrifice by her aunt, not by the man who had abandoned her before birth. But it was Henry whom the room turned toward next. When he stood, silence filled the chamber. He did not read from notes. His voice carried the weight of lived truth. "Family isn't made by blood," he said. "It's made by presence. By being there at bedtime, through school projects, through bad dreams and small victories. Nora once asked me if I would still be there when she woke up. Every day since, I've answered that question, not with words, but with action." He glanced toward Jason. Her biological father had every chance to be that presence. He chose not to. He wasn't there when she was sick, when she was scared, when she needed someone. Biology didn't wipe her tears. Love did. The room was silent. Even Jason's smirk faltered. The judge leaned forward. "Would the child like to speak?" Claire opened her mouth to protest, but before she could, Nora stood. Her knees shook, but she walked to the front, bear in hand. She turned toward the judge, her voice soft but unwavering. "I don't remember him," she said, pointing at Jason. "He never came for me." "But he did." She turned to Henry, eyes wet. "He stayed. He brings me cocoa and stars for my ceiling. He listens. He makes me feel safe, like I belong." The judge's expression softened. "And what do you want, Nora?" She sniffled, clutching her bear. "I want to stay home." Before Jason's lawyer could object, a man in plain clothes entered, handing the judge a file. The judge scanned it, then looked directly at Jason. "Mr. Moore, I've received confirmation you are under investigation for narcotics distribution and parole violations. Is that correct?" Jason's face went pale. He stammered, but the judge slammed the folder shut. "That is enough for me to render a decision." The words that followed reshaped their world. Full custody remained with Claire. Jason's visitation rights were suspended indefinitely pending criminal proceedings, and Henry Whitmore was formally recognized as a designated guardian, authorized to act in emergencies. The gavel struck, and the battle was over. Nora dropped her bear and ran into Henry's arms, sobbing against his chest, not from fear, but from release. Claire sank onto the bench outside, head in her hands. Henry sat beside her, Nora still clinging to him. "I don't know what we would have done without you," Claire whispered. Henry kissed the top of Nora's hair. "You'll never have to face it alone again." In the weeks that followed, peace slowly returned. Jason was arrested, this time on charges that would keep him locked away for years. Claire finally breathed without the constant weight of dread. Nora began to smile in her sleep again. And Henry realized he felt more at home in their modest apartment than he ever had in his penthouse of glass and steel. A few months later, they moved not out of necessity, but out of choice. Henry oversaw the renovation of a warm apartment near the Botanical Gardens with wide windows and crown molding. It was not lavish, but it felt alive. Nora's bedroom walls were painted lavender, her shelves filled with books and art supplies, and above her bed twinkled fiber optic lights shaped like constellations. She gasped when she first saw them. "It's real stars," she whispered. Henry smiled. "They're yours." Life found a rhythm. Sundays became pancake days, galaxy breakfasts with blueberries and whipped cream. Claire painted again, selling pieces in a local gallery. Nora thrived at school, her drawings filled with bright skies and smiling figures. Henry learned to braid her hair, burning through tutorials until he got it right. At a school event, Nora introduced him proudly as "my kind of dad." The phrase stuck in his heart like an anchor of belonging. One evening, as Claire printed a photo of that event, a family photo, their first, she whispered to Henry, "She doesn't call you Dad, but she's starting to treat you like one." Henry looked at her, water dripping from his hands after washing dishes. "Is that okay?" Claire's gaze lingered, then softened. "I think it might be exactly what she needs." Their life was not perfect. There were bills, spills, and small arguments. But it was theirs. It was real. And it was enough. One night, Nora handed Henry a drawing. 3 figures, holding hands beneath a sky full of stars. "Now we all have a home," she whispered. Henry's eyes blurred as he held her hand gently. "Sweetheart, you gave it to us first. We just made it real." And in that little apartment filled with laughter, art supplies, and second chances, they stayed. In the end, what began as a chance encounter on a snowy street became something no one could have predicted. A family born not of blood, but of choice. Henry, the man who once measured his life in profits and projections, discovered a truth that could never be printed on a balance sheet, that home is not the square footage or the skyline view. It is laughter spilling from a small kitchen, bedtime stories whispered under glow-in-the-dark stars, and the quiet reassurance that someone will still be there in the morning. Nora, the little girl who once whispered that she had no home, now draws pictures filled with warmth, safety, and joy. Her voice no longer trembles with fear, but rings with the certainty of belonging. And Claire, who carried the weight of raising her alone, finally allows herself to rest, to paint again, to dream again, because she no longer has to shoulder it all by herself. Together they built something stronger than wealth, stronger than walls, a promise to stay. Their days are not perfect. There are still messy breakfasts, spilled juice, arguments over homework, and mismatched socks. But it is in those small imperfections that the truest kind of love is found. The kind that does not vanish when storms arrive. The kind that stays. Stories like these remind us that family is not about where we start. It is about who chooses to walk beside us. Sometimes, the most unexpected moments reveal the deepest truths. Sometimes, the people who appear when we need them most become the ones who change everything. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the resilience of love and the power of staying when it matters most, then we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to the Retold Stories, where every tale is a journey of hope, healing, and second chances. Because in the end, the greatest stories are not the ones we read in books or watch on screens. They are the ones that remind us we are never truly alone.